Parents of Reddit, how do you feel when your kid brings back a girlfriend/boyfriend? How do you decide whether you like them or not? Story 1. My husband and I always like the person unless there's something terribly wrong with them. First of all, we want our kids to trust us and never to disregard our not liking a potential mate because we never like anyone. Secondly, we would never want our kids to feel like they have to choose. It's their mate, not ours. Thirdly, most young people are fairly okay, so no point in acting like no one can be good enough for our precious babies. Now, I appreciate the sensitive answer, but at the same time, does anyone else find it a little weird how they said mates? That's not just me, right? Story 2. I feel excited for them. It's that wonderful time at the start of a new relationship, and it's exciting to see them happy and enjoying this new experience. It's still quite new for me and them, so as a parent, I'm still learning. I've been fine with all the people I've been introduced to so far. Maybe as I know that the likelihood is these relationships won't last, so for me it's not an issue if I don't take to them. Time will tell once their relationships become more serious. Story 3. My daughter, 13, wanted me to meet her first real boyfriend. I was nice and pleasant, but I knew it wouldn't last because he was all looks and no brains. Of course, as junior high relationships go, it was about a 2-month ordeal. I think all parents should try to be cordial unless the person feels like a serial killer or something. Now, what business does this grown woman have saying a 13-year-old is all looks? That's weird, right? I think that's weird. Although I guess I should give her the benefit of the doubt. It's like, he's so cute kind of thing, you know? But I don't know. Watch yourself, lady. I'm also just realizing I only assumed OP was a woman. I don't actually know that. Anyway, next story. Story 4. My eldest is 15, and boys in high school can be gross. The way they speak to girls and girls to boys is just so far out of line it makes me ill. But her boyfriend is respectful to her and her family. Most importantly, they're the same brand of weird. They FaceTime 19 hours a day, I swear, but yesterday they had an entire conversation about penguins, both using the same weird fake Russian-type accent. He's her safe space, and without very good cause, I would never get in the way of that. Story 5. My stepdaughter's boyfriend came into my house, and we were talking about computer games, and he had the audacity to tell me why Red Dead 2 was better than God of War. In my house. But respect to the lad for that. He stuck to his principles, and a year later, he still argues with me about gaming stuff. Story 6. My mother-in-law assumed I was some sort of player when I first met her before my first date with my wife. Even told my wife she assumed I went on lots of dates back at school. Joke's on her, I spent the entirety of my freshman year, a year before I met my wife, enjoying the sweet, sweet internet speed of my dorm room and playing the crap out of Halo 3, Mass Effect 1 and 2, picking up drunk dorm mates from house parties at 3 a.m., and going on exactly 0 dates. After years of getting to know my mother-in-law, she just didn't want her daughter to get into a long-distance relationship, then end up moving out of the state with me if we got married and I was still there. Which did actually end up happening. Whoops. Story 7. Not a mother, but I'm a sister to a lovely brother. He had brought some girls in the house in his teenage years, and instantly I would know if I liked them or not. The first one he brought was super rude with me and my parents. She would eat alone in the bedroom when we were having dinner, force my brother to be mean to me, etc. A few months after, the relationship ended in a really bad way. After that, brought some girls, didn't talk so much with them, but they were nice and sweet. Didn't last long, less than 2 months. The last one he brought, when I talked to her, only one thought came to mind. She's the one. 5 or 6 years later, here they are, living together. Story 8. When my eldest daughter introduced her first serious boyfriend, he was an awkward kind of guy. Was pretty unremarkable, but he got super animated about topics that interested him. I had a chat with him about my daughter. He got animated. They've been married for 9 years. Good guy, works hard, is a staunch advocate for his wife, and I love his smile when he looks at their kids. My oldest son's first girlfriend was, well, not an emotional investment he was willing to make. She was pretty, but that was it. I scolded him, he got defensive, almost married her, but she made the mistake of asking my son about my money. About a year later, he brought home a beautiful, talented woman with an electric personality and more self-confidence than even him. I was never more proud of him than when he took that dive. Their kids are incredible, great couple. My second daughter just introduced us to a college friend of hers. He seems like a decent person. He's young, but he's got a head on his shoulders and seems able to conduct himself politely. I'll need more time to figure it out. My youngest son had a high school sweetheart girlfriend that's now his college girlfriend. When I first met her, she was 9, so I'm pretty enamored with her. Her parents have babysat and house sat for us, and they're all good people. My youngest daughter has introduced me to a girlfriend from her trade school recently. Pretty sure she's been dating her for a couple of years. She's angry, contrary, and bitter. Under all that baggage, it's hard to tell. But I'm hoping that my home can be a place where she can just let whatever angers her so much disappear for a while, and I can find out who she actually is. I've asked a good friend of my daughter's if there's ever been any signs of violence, as that's my only real concern, but so far it seems fine on that front. My youngest has always been a bit more subdued and contemplative than the others, so I'm hoping that whatever bitterness is in her girlfriend's life doesn't hurt her. This relationship is the most concerning one to me because my daughter is a very sensitive person, and I fear for her happy, cheerful spirit. Now, interestingly enough, to me, this one sounded a lot like a dad was saying it, as opposed to like the first one that I wasn't specified and I thought it was a mom. Let me know if you agree, I'm interested. Regardless, this parent seems extremely sweet. I'm really glad that whichever parent this is seems to care for their children just so much and just wants them to be happy and safe and healthy. Story 9. Here's my dad's take. He liked my ex-boyfriend at first because he was initially polite and friendly and I was very happy with him. However, my dad started to notice red flags later on and his opinion of him changed. For example, when we came back to my place from a day trip, he had sulked because I didn't show the enthusiasm he wanted about his favorite landmark. My dad told him that he should forgive me, but he still would not stop whining. My dad later told me that his reaction was blown out of proportion. Basically, my dad would decide whether or not to like any guy I bring home based on the way he treats me. Part of me is like, this is kind of overstepping. The other part of me is, well, it says XBF, so I guess dad was onto something. Story 10. This is a tough subject. My daughter started dating a guy when she turned 17. He said he came from a rough childhood, so he didn't like to talk about his family. He told us they were refugees from Haiti who moved to the US to better their lives. He said his family one day just decided to move from our state to the other side of the country. We all would ask questions, but he would just shut up. It was troubling, but he seemed polite and kind. He called me mom and was visiting every day. Then my daughter turned 18 and they moved in together. I felt it was too soon, but she thought she was in love. He was still his nice, quiet self in front of our family. My daughter began telling me that he didn't want to cook or clean and just wanted to play PS4 while she worked full time. I told her to keep talking to him about how she was becoming unhappy. He would make her promises but continue to do what he was doing. She worked graveyards, so he would say that he worked during the day and she'd believe him. She had a puppy who he agreed to look after and clean up for as a shared responsibility. He wasn't doing this at night when she was at work or when he was off. She had an opportunity to go to Disneyland for a week as a babysitter for her little cousins. After making sure he was okay with it, she went. She got home a day early to surprise her dog on his birthday. She found him lethargic, with no food or water and no AC on in the hot Arizona weather. She broke up with her boyfriend then and there. She said her dog was like her son and she wasn't going to stand for that type of neglect. I picked her up and her ex-boyfriend followed her out. He was politely telling me to not let her leave him. I told him to give it a few days. After we left, I could tell her voice was hoarse. She said they had a loud argument. The next morning, she asked her dad and I to take her back to the apartment so they could talk. She could get some of her stuff and leave on good terms with him. I asked if we could go in with her and she said, "No, Mom, I'm an adult. I got this." I jokingly asked if she was going to take her dog to protect her. She said, "No, as long as he's with you, I know he'll be well taken care of." Her words made me joke with her and ask if she was going to run away or something, and she just laughed and called me silly. She kept in contact with me and at noonish asked me to come get her. We went there and there was no answer. It sounded like the apartment was empty. We called the cops. They did a wellness check 5 hours later after we begged and begged. We had searched everywhere and called everyone she knew, but they had both disappeared. We kept going back to the apartment, hoping wherever they went, they'd come back, but still nothing. A neighbor brought me a chair to sit and wait outside the apartment until she came. I sat staring at one point on the wall as long as I sat there. I had a fear so primal and deep it slowed down my thought process. Another neighbor came to me and said that she heard we were looking for my daughter. What she said next made my blood run cold. She said, "I saw your daughter around 12:30 or 1. Her boyfriend was kicking her and dragging her by the hair into the apartment." I called 911 again because I knew whatever we found in the apartment was not something we would want to see. The 911 operator didn't believe me even after I let her talk to the neighbor. We broke the window and I climbed in. I found my precious, beautiful, sweet, amazing, loving daughter surrounded in blood. She had been strangled and stabbed in the throat. The spot where I'd been staring all day was the spot my daughter was killed at on the other side of the wall. He had killed her before we got there and she bled out in minutes. The kind guy who called me mom was really a monster underneath it all. He has no remorse. I was in disbelief and felt a misunderstanding had happened. I went and saw him once he turned himself in 2 days later. He said he did it because he couldn't live without her. Never let your loved ones be alone when they're breaking up or going to meet someone they just broke up with. Learn from the biggest mistake of my life. I'd do anything to rewind time and save my daughter. Narrator's commentary. This is an insanely heartbreaking story. Oh my god. The neglect of the animal is like a super big red flag, but come on, no one expects the boyfriend of their daughter to all of a sudden just be a psychopath like that. This poor mom probably blames herself a lot, and that's not fair. It's not her fault. Sometimes people just do really bad things. My heart absolutely goes out to this family. Story 11. Not a parent, but this was my experience with my mother when I was a teen. So as a teen, my mother pulled me to the side and gave me the gay talk. You know, the I'll still love you even if you were gay talk. I asked her why she thought I was gay, and she said it was because I was never bringing any girls to the house. Guess what I did within the next few days? I brought a girl in the house. Guess what my mother did? She kicked her out and gave me a lecture on how inappropriate it was to bring girls into the house. Yes, it makes no sense. Story 12. Okay, so as someone who's been the boyfriend made to meet parents, there is one meeting I always loved. The dad is sitting in the living room with me while his daughter is getting ready. Dude seems very approachable. He asks me about football, which, where I live, is a big deal. I tell him I'm not into football and I would rather see the money go back into the community like the arts or social help. He looks at me and says, "That's what I wanted to hear." Then he points me to his record collection and says, "Pick something good while Charlotte gets ready." So I'm looking through his record collection and there's a lot of stuff in there that I was already into. Lots of 80s, 90s alt rock. I notice he has Signals, Calls and Marches, Mission of Burma, and Stick That On. He asks me why I picked something like that over a safe choice like Nevermind Nirvana or Led Zeppelin 4. I just tell him because this is the album that got me into post-punk. To be honest, my relationship with his daughter ended, but every time I'd seen him around town, he would always buy me a coffee and we'd talk about the best Scottish bands ever. I love this one because you know the daughter's just like, "Come on, dad, why are you still friends with my ex? That's so weird." And the dad's all like, "Oh, I just like him." I love that. That's a hilarious dynamic. Story 13. Met my daughter's boyfriend the other day. First boyfriend. She's 17, he's 18. I must admit I was a bit nervous, and I remember very well being 18 and what I was thinking/wanting. But I had a word with myself to be welcoming and warm and to treat him as an equal, my daughter's friend and therefore my friend. Anyway, he's a nice young man, so it's all good. But to answer your question, if he's nice, I'll like him. If he's a jerk, I won't. Either way, as far as my daughter is concerned, I'll like him. Story 14. It's about respect. If they're treating my kid, spouse, or myself like crap in my own home, how do you think I'll feel? Some politeness goes a long way, and of course it's a two-way street. Chances are you also know your kids well enough to notice if this person is a total 180 from their usual friends or previous SO or whatever. Sometimes a red flag, but not always. You've likely had experiences with them bringing over someone from the wrong crowd, and this is honestly not that different. It's all about how you see them treat others. But since they're probably teenagers, you can't read too much into things like what they want to do when they grow up and so on. I'd hope by your 40s or whatever you know about how to tell if someone's head is screwed on properly or not. It's still important to let them explore and learn the odd, rough lesson on their own. You constantly weighing in on how much you disapprove of their SO only drives them further to them. Although you don't want to be too late to interfere if things are getting a little too out of control, like that dad who killed his daughter's boyfriend for getting her into hard drugs and ruining her life, don't let it get there. At the end of the day, no one can get them to break up except themselves. They have to learn what's best for them and figure it out on their own. Don't meddle too much. This sounds like a super healthy and great approach. I've got big props for this parent. Look at that, I said parent, I didn't assume which one. Although, if you have to ask me, this one sounds like a dad. I don't know why, it's just something the way it's written. Anyway, the whole thing about no one can get them to break up except themselves, super true. You gotta let your kids make their own decisions, and if you do want them to make a certain one, just guide them there. You can't make it for them. Story 15. My kids are small, but I basically raise my brother. 15-year difference, and his new girlfriend is unique. I'm trying to like her, but she is very much so on the spectrum and gets overwhelmed by my 4-year-old daughter. My little girl loves to hug people and doesn't understand why my brother's girlfriend freaks out when she gets too close. My brother himself has anxiety issues, and I worry they are feeding into each other's negative emotions. It's hard to tell because she is shy, but she seems nice and makes my brother happy, so I'm doing my best, but it's hard to not have concerns. I can't really say anything to my brother because it sends his anxiety through the roof. His previous girlfriends were fine, but they weren't serious relationships. I gotta say, OP, I think you just take a step back. If your brother's girlfriend is on the spectrum, then yeah, not wanting to be touched by someone unfamiliar or even a kid is like super, super expected. I also don't know about the whole part about like feeding into each other's negative emotions. That seems weird. Is having a mental disability a negative emotion to OP? A little sus. Story 16. I've given my daughter the best advice I can give her, and she's leaps and bounds better at relationships than a lot of older adults I know. She's nearly drinking age where we're from. That's not to brag though, as a lot of what I told her was don't do the same dumb crap that I did. Well, that and to always know her worth. The moment someone makes her feel less important than they are, they get the boot. She doesn't try to fix people she dates. You are who you are, and if you're not right, then oh well. Honestly, it's something she said to me once that helped me to be better off when dating. Married now. I'd made the remark that I hadn't understood some sappy things people do when they're in love. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "That's because you've loved, but you've never been in love." She wasn't wrong, and as much as I sometimes hate to admit it, she rarely is. That caused me to examine the relationship I was in under closer scrutiny than I ever had before. My husband today is the most amazing husband and father we could have asked for, but never realized until now that we deserved. Story 17. I come from a middle-class Indian immigrant family, and my parents were never cool with us kids having boyfriends. So when at the age of 25 I brought my boyfriend home, they were a bit hesitant and took a long time to open up to him. My mom went all mother-in-law mode and felt like she had to keep up appearances. If he came over and she was laying on the couch, she would get up and act all formal. The first day he met my dad, I asked my dad afterwards what he thinks of my boyfriend. His response was, "Don't lose him, that's all." Now he comes over and hangs out with them without an ounce of formality. They all have little inside jokes with him, my siblings included. My parents went car shopping and I didn't get to go, so my dad asked if the boyfriend and I would take a look at the car one day after work. They just really wanted him to check it out too, which felt so special to me because they value his opinion and he's part of the family now. I never would have imagined that my family would welcome him like this. Melts my heart. This is a great story because when I think of these types of families, I'm always scared they're going to be very, like, oh, study, 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 and then you're out of school. It's like, oh, why aren't you married yet? I guess that's kind of like an Asian stereotype, but hey, I'm Asian. I kind of expected it, but I got lucky. I feel like a dad of someone you're dating saying, don't lose him, that's all, is like the highest praise you can get in the entire world. If anyone can think of something better, let me know, but I doubt it. Story 18. Not a parent, but my parents were always fine with my boyfriends. My dad had a sixth sense, though. He not only knew on instinct which of mine were off, just off of meeting them once, just off of feeling, so he would never have said anything to me, but he knew in 2 seconds of meeting him before junior prom that my best friend's first boyfriend was super slimy and fake. And he was. He was cheating on her and we found out months later. Generally though, I'd say my parents liked most of my boyfriends, but when I brought home my current one, they told me they loved him. And my mom later put it like this. All the other guys were fine, but we didn't seem like good matches. They knew on meeting this one that he was right for me. After a while, I think what you really want to look for from/as parents is that enthusiastic reaction of a good fit.